It's an amazing day. Andrea M. Stuckey here, the divorce liberator and your favorite divorce coach, founder of the amazing community, Divorced Women Unite. Welcome, 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 Instagram, to this morning's broadcast. Great to have you here this morning. Listen, we have been talking all week about co-parenting, boundaries and co-parenting, navigating difficult emotions and co-parenting, and I've given some tips on some primary goals of co-parenting. And so today we're going to be talking about child support, the great debate. Child support, the great debate. So if you're new to me and you're just popping upon me for the very first time, not only am I a divorce coach where I work with separated and divorced women, I'm also a two-time divorcee. So I have been divorced twice, in my mid-20s and in my early 40s. And at the taping of this video, I have been out of my second marriage for 11 and a half years. So I have a 17-year-old daughter. I have an adult child as well. But I've been homeschooling. I've been co-parenting for the past 11 and a half years. So not only am I a divorce coach, listen, I'm right in the trenches with you guys, right? Those of you who are co-parenting, dealing with child support, child visitations, all those things. And as I've been saying all week, I'd like to give my ex-husband and I a 97% rating when it comes to our 11 years of co-parenting. Now, we've had some challenging times, even when it comes to child support. However, I believe that we've been able to put our own personal agendas aside and really, really focus on my daughter, and the fruit is the result, right, of how she has managed her life, how she's doing up until this point for the past 11 and a half years. And I will give us a 97% rating. But let me tell you, those 3% times, if you will, were very, very challenging, especially in the beginning of the co-parenting journey. And that's why I've shared some tips with you here on this week. I work extensively with women in different, group coaching programs, one-on-one coaching when I work with women in this area, because it can be very, very difficult and challenging, especially if you've come out of a very toxic or abusive relationship. So if you missed any of the previous videos, make sure you go back, look on my IGTV channel and catch up. Okay, so you can get some of those tips. And if you know of someone who's co-parenting, please share out the video, post it on your timeline, on your stories, share, because you never know what people are going through and how just a few little tips can help change their lives, right? So today I want to talk about child support. It's the great debate. If you just Google on social media or look up on Facebook, you hear people talking about child support, what it entails. They feel that it's men and women too. Women pay child support just as well as men pay child support. And no one's really happy with the situation. On either side, it appears to be, for the most part, right? And so I just want to talk a little bit about it today and give you some tips on how you can help navigate the space of child support, and also what that relationship should look like between you, the other co-parents, and your children during the journey of anything surrounding child support. Okay? So the first thing, what is child support, right? Child support is a non-custodial parent paying the custodial parent, and that means the custodial parent has the child majority of the time, right? They're actually dwelling in their household, and they pay them for the sake of the child to cover food, shelter, and clothing. Food, shelter, and clothing. Let me say this again. Food, shelter, and clothing. Generally, now there's exceptions to every rule, okay? Generally, most states have a formula that they use based on the income of both parents. That's kind of how it's usually, I think you may be able to check in your own state. You can, I know here in Virginia, there's a website. You can go in and put your annual income. You can put the non-custodial parent's annual income. They'll ask you some other questions, and usually it'll give you a ballpark of what the child support should be or how much the child support should be paid to the custodial parent by the non-custodial parent, right? And it varies depending on how many children that you have. Okay, so let me be really, really clear. And you have to remember, every state's laws are different. When it comes to divorce and child support, every state's laws are different. So you have to check the laws of your state, right? But generally, the idea is to cover food, shelter, and clothing for the child or children. Oftentimes we feel from the custodial parent that the child support is not enough. And oftentimes we feel you hear from the non-custodial parent that they are paying too much. So let's talk a little bit about that today. And I want to just share some of my personal experience, things that I've seen just living almost 53 years. And then also how I've seen my clients work together with their ex-spouses, and some things that we've helped put them in, things or strategies that we have helped put into play to help the space of child support so that the children benefit. Because remember, the goal is for the children. They need to be stable, they need to be secure, and they need to have their basic needs met: food, shelter, and clothing. Okay? Just want to look over my notes to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything. I've already said that, the courts really determine the amount the payment will be. And it's usually a formula that the state creates, right? You can look that up online. Check that out. And let me know in the comment section, does your state have that calculator online? I'd love to hear some feedback from you. I'm in the state of Virginia, and we have one the last time that I checked, right? But the first tip I want to leave with you today is to have child support automated. I said it. Automated. No one likes to have it automated, right? Whether it's the woman that's paying child support or the man that's having paying child support. They don't like it. But there's a benefit to it. And let me tell you what that benefit is. When you're going through a separation or divorce, and the court has given a judgment for the non-custodial parent to pay child support, you will have to meet up or determine a way that you will receive these funds on a consistent basis for your child or for your children. The challenge is that if it is not automated, there are so many factors that can come into play where you may not receive that child support payment in a protracted, reasonable part of time, in a reasonable period of time, which is not fair to the custodial parent. Point blank, period. Right? And ideally what happens is, when the judgment is given, initially, if it's not automated, sure, the payments pretty much come on time. Whether you meet them, whether they, automate it to you in your bank account, whether they come and give you cash and you give them receipt. But there has to be some type of exchange, right? There has to be some type of interpersonal communication. You may have to actually see that person and make that exchange. And oftentimes when you're going through a separation or divorce, those type of interactions usually don't go well. Because you may already be in a situation where you're fighting over assets. You're trying to determine, outside of child support, just your assets that you had, how you're going to divide them up, who has been left with what. And finances are a very challenging subject when you're going through a separation or divorce, right? And so the fact or the chances, and there's exceptions to rules now, that you are going to be able to receive that particular amount of income consistently from the non-custodial parent, consistently over years, is probably very small. Because when something comes up in their lives, you may not get the payment that you need to provide food, shelter, and clothing for your children, right? Because it's human nature, right? It's human nature. Hey, welcome to the broadcast. Great to have you here. Please tap the screen for hearts if you're coming on live, right? And so, in my opinion, And you can drop a comment below. I would love to hear some feedback. But I believe, and I have seen it work in my own life and countless other women's lives, when the payment is automated, it makes everyone's lives better. Because over time, the non-custodial parent doesn't have to deal with it. It's coming out of their payment, their check or checking account, whatever they do, and it's going, unfortunately, through the child support system. And there can be some drawbacks to that. But the payment is being made, right? And then ultimately, the custodial parent will receive the payment. And over time, it's already done. You don't have to make that interaction for 10 years. If you have an 8-year-old, that means you'll be having to actually have that level of communication with your ex-spouse on a regular basis, and over time that just may not be the best. When they have a new girlfriend or a new boyfriend, or they remarry, and you still have to have these specific interactions, just may not be healthy. It may not go over well emotionally for all the parties involved. So my number one suggestion, and it's my opinion, and I can have it, and this is my channel, is to have the child support automated. The end, period. And I know a lot of people aren't going to like it, and I'd love to hear your feedback. And this is one of the notes, and this has been my experience. Emotions get involved, you guys, right? Emotions get involved. And I'm going to come to a point in the end. I want to share something. And I'm going to tell you why, another reason why this is important, because when emotions get involved, people start living their lives, then there are a lot of assumptions that are being made. And so there can be a withholding of child support funds to the detriment, ultimately, of the child. Point number 2 I want to share is that child support and child visitation are not the same. They're not interchangeable. And I'm talking to women and men. Men. Women and men. Child visitation should have nothing to do with child support. Your children are not pawns. Children need to interact with the other parent. They need time with the other parent, whether the parent is paying or not. Now, I'm going to be real clear. And a lot of women, a lot of men don't like to hear that. And they want to make it interchangeable. It's not. If we remove money from the equation, children need to spend time with both parents. Period. We've been talking about this all week, how children benefit from healthy relationships with their parents. Now, we're not talking about if there's a situation that's endangering children. Bona fide endangerment, where you need to call the authorities, where you need to have something evaluated, a situation or circumstance or an individual evaluated. That is real, not just assumptions, not just your opinions, right? This is important. And I'm talking to my ladies. I'm talking to my women. I'm talking to the mothers. Because oftentimes you allow those emotions to get in the way of what is the best need of your child. And so if you don't receive child support, or there is a lack of payment, you want to use your children as pawns. You want to use your children as objects. And that's not fair to your children. And that's why it's important that we heal and we stay in a space of emotional maturity so that our children can get the lives that they need and the interactions that they need and the love that they need from both parents. Let it not be you who puts the wedge in between your child and the other parent's relationship. Let it not be you. Okay? Child support and child visitation are not the same, nor are they interchangeable. Right? One doesn't predicate the other. Right? We're talking about for the benefit of children here. And then last point number 3, before I get into my little bonus and hot topic part I want to talk about, is that you have to work together. Right? And children benefit. And so let me just share this. I've seen just over years people debating about who should pay for children's like extracurricular activities or tuition and things of that nature. And We know that child support is technically for food, shelter, and clothing, but we know that children need much more than that. Let's be real. There's school fees. Maybe your children go to public school, but maybe you want them to go to private school. Maybe in the past you both determined that that's the way that you like to educate your children, or the type of activities that you want your children to have or be involved in to help them grow and have a greater exposure to life, right? And build their confidence, whether it's sports or the arts, or church functions, youth groups, whatever those things are. They all cost money. And outside of food, shelter, and clothing, there's still other expenses for children. There's health care, and the judge determines that based on each parent's assets, their jobs, and what they have available to them, right? The court, that varies from case to case, but these are still needs that children have, right? And when you have those children under your roof, you are the one who has to make those decisions. Hopefully you can make them together as a parent and still look outside of the food, shelter, and clothing costs, and you can come to some sort of agreement of how you both can contribute to the total well-being of your children, right? And so it's just very interesting how people want to remove those aspects of a child's life when it comes to money. I want you to think about that on today, regardless of what side of the coin that you're on, right? I want you to think about that, but you have to work together. Children benefit when the parents work together on those extracurricular activities that most children desire and most children need as an outlet, right? And especially when you have working parents. And most of the time, if parents have divorced or separated, usually they're in a single parent household. Now, it gets a little different if somebody remarries and things of that nature, and you have a bonus dad or mom or stepdad or mom, whatever you want to, title you want to use, or no title at all. Situations can change, right? But you got to work together. That's the key. You have to be mature enough to work together so that the financial contributions of both parents ultimately benefit the child. Okay? Now, here's a hot topic that I hear a lot, which I've never really fully understood, and it's usually men towards women, right? A narrative of something of this nature. I've heard this and seen it on posts all across social media. Good morning. Great to see you, Coach D. Great morning to you. And here's the great debate, or one of the great debates, is oftentimes men are paying child support. And when they see the woman flourishing, meaning that she's dressed well, her hair is done, her nails is done, maybe she's traveling, maybe she's living, maybe beyond her means, I don't really know, but she's, she appears well, that they somehow assume that their child support money is paying for her extra activities, if you will. And it always baffles me how you can determine that. I mean, really, unless the woman doesn't have an income of her own. And no, I won't even say that. The real only reason that should be an assumption is if the child does not have food, the child does not have shelter, and the child does not have clothing. If the child is being fed properly, if the child has shelter and a roof over their heads, they're paying their rent and making sure that their home is well, and they have the clothing that they need, maybe not necessarily the clothing that they want, but the clothing that they need, then how can you determine how someone else manages their money? You can't. It all goes into one big pot. You can't say that this particular amount of money, that $500, $600, $700, $800, whatever it may be, is going to her hair. You don't know that. Does she have an income? Does she have a savings? Do you know that she's not gifted with things? perhaps from family or friends or whatever. So a lot of times it's really, and that's when I talk about how people get emotions involved in these child support battles. Because if there is a bona fide mismanagement, then you need to prove it and you need to take it to court. Now, there has been situations where children aren't being dressed, they don't have the clothes that they need, that the parent is unable to keep shelter over their heads, and that the children are going hungry. There are those cases. But majority of the time, that is not the case. That's why you cannot take the mother back to court, because the children are being fed, and the children do have a roof, and the children do have clothing. And as I stated at the beginning of this broadcast, those are usually the factors for child support. Not extracurricular activities, not school tuition. None of that is factored in generally to the child support payment. Now, we're not talking about spousal, alimony, any of that. We're talking about child support payments. And just like I said on yesterday about boundaries, that if you feel the opposite parent is mishandling a child or there's an endangerment to the child, then you need to bring in the proper authorities. Whether it's the police, whether it's the social worker, whether it's an investigation, and if it's not, then get out of your emotions. The same thing when we talk about child support. If you're saying that the custodial parent, women or men, it's usually the men that make the complaint, but it can be either side, that the children are not properly being cared for, then shouldn't you take them back to court? Shouldn't you be able to prove your case? The children are hungry, there's no food, there's no clothing, and there's no shelter. Outside of that, if you cannot prove that, ask yourself, are you really in your feelings? Are you really in your feelings? And it can go both ways, right? You have a lot of times women can get upset when men have moved on and they have new relationships and they're building new relationships, and whether they're dating or they have a new boo, if you will, or something of that nature. And then women or the custodial parent, who is the mother, may feel that ex is mismanaging his funds because he's not contributing to extracurricular activities, child tuition, things that are not food, shelter, and clothing, right? So you have a great debate here between both sides. What I want to share, my main point today with you, as I've been sharing all week, is that it's not about you. Meaning both parents, whichever one you are. It's not about you. It's about raising secure, stable, safe, emotionally healthy children who have what they need and occasionally what they want. Because as parents, we know that when we were together, if you were ever together, and you had dreams and aspirations for your children, there are things that you desire for your children outside of the basics, because we really expect to cover that anyway as a parent, right? And so I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear your comments. And I'd love to hear your challenges, right? Drop it in the comment section below. Send me a DM. I'll come back and we can have a live stream Q&A. But this is a hot topic when you start talking about money and exes, right? But today we're talking about child support, right? Because we can get into the alimony part. We can get into spousal support, divvying up of assets during the divorce. But when it comes to the finances, filing a separation or divorce, it's really, really challenging for all parties involved. And so hopefully when we talk about our children and we talk about being in a position of a co-parent, that as mature adults, we can learn to put our emotional feelings aside and really focus on the needs, physical, social, emotional needs of our children. So listen, if you haven't picked up the free copy of your ebook, Keep Cool in Co-Parenting, since we're talking about co-parenting this week, you can definitely go to, let me see if I can stick it in. I don't know if it's, let's see. No, I can't do it. Let me type it in below. If you guys will give me a minute. And pick up your free ebook. It's a download of Keep Cool and Co-Parent. And got some great tips in there for you to go along with what we've been talking about this week. Keep Cool and Co-Parent 21. bit.ly/Keep Cool and Co-Parent 21. You can download a free copy of that ebook that can be helpful for you, especially if you're new to the co-parenting journey. And listen, if you're having some challenges and you've noticed that it's getting rough, think about some of the things that we've been talking about, right? Some boundaries that you may need to implement, a different level of communication with the other parent, right? But we want the focus to be on the children. And it can be very, very difficult for us, but we have to man up and woman up, right? Because the children did not ask to be in these particular situations. It is of our doing, not theirs. Real talk, right? So again, I'm Andre M. Stuckey, the Divorce Liberator and your favorite divorce coach, founder of the amazing community Divorce Women Unite. And so this week we've been talking about all things co-parenting. So make sure you go back and check out the previous broadcasts, and listen, catch me live here every morning, somewhere between 7 and 7:30 Eastern Standard Time for more hot topics. And tomorrow I'll be on probably with more of a Q&A recap of co-parenting 101, if you will. So have a wonderful and blessed day. And listen, remember, no matter what the situation or the circumstance is that you're facing on today, God is always with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Stay and be encouraged, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.